Lily Ray, what do you think the effects of screens are?
I like it.
Hi, I'm Lou and this is Lily Rowe, and today's video is a little bit impromptu. I didn't plan on making this video and it may also be slightly sensitive subject because it's about screen time. And basically we were driving here and I was listening to the radio and I was a little bit, I guess, shocked to hear like an advert campaign that it was on the BBC radio station, and it was about screen time for children, and it was basically suggesting that, you know, it's about what you watch on the screen that matters, which I do agree with. That is true, but I guess to me it seemed incredibly biased and not impartial, and it only presented one side of the argument, if you like, the case for screen time for children. Now, before we get into this, just to let you know, I'm not coming from a place of no screens ever, despite I am a little bit like a Luddite, but I understand that, you know, screens, and particularly since the pandemic, has been you know, it has been a useful tool in many ways, being able to continue to work and to educate online when people couldn't physically meet. I do appreciate the technology, and I also appreciate the huge irony that I'm talking to you on a screen right now as well. So I'm not saying that screens are all bad. I guess also the BBC are incredibly biased because they want people to watch their programmes on screens, but in case you haven't seen the clip, I do recommend kind of listening to it or watching. There is like a little animation about it, but it talks about like a boy who they talk about the stereotype of being square-eyed, and you know, how people were judging him and his family for looking at a screen, and then like the case at the end is like, well, maybe actually watching these programs makes you more rounded, not just not square-eyed, but a rounded human being. So yeah, from my perspective it was really quite biased, and I don't think it is as clear cut as they're making out, in terms of it's just, you know, it's just make sure you watch educational content rather than just junk content. There is a lot of research out there about kind of screen time and childhood, and I think not presenting both sides of the argument is, yeah, incredibly biased for some organisation as big as the BBC. And I mean, just to let you know, like, Lily Rowe does watch screens as well, but in my perspective it is about balance. And, you know, we live in this really difficult modern day world where we've lost our village. So in terms of raising children, parenting children, educating children, like, you know, perhaps our hunter-gatherer ancestors would have a whole village to help us, whereas now in sort of nuclear families, if we're lucky, we've got two parents. Some people might only have one parent. You know, it is impossible to give 100% of the time to the child's, you know, healthy development without having a support network of people around us. And so maybe screen time has become that sort of necessary evil. Like, you know, if we need to do some housework, which is funny because I don't really do housework, or, you know, if we need to do some jobs or something, and you know, we need a quiet moment, you know, putting on some Peppa Pig or something enables us to do that, because we don't have other caregivers or other sort of older children as well, perhaps, to play with that child. I did think it was interesting as well that this campaign that the BBC mentions the square-eyed things, because out of all of the research about eyesight is quite an interesting one. So there is something called like digital eye fatigue, where it has been documented that if you look at screens, particularly close up, so things like phones and iPads are worse than televisions, things that are like at close range are worse for your eyes. Because if you're only looking at that fixed point in a short distance, that can cause your eyes to become fatigued. You also don't blink as often when you're looking at screens, so your eyes kind of tend to get dry, or can get irritation, or even get like infections more easily because you're not cleaning the surface of your eye as much by blinking. There's also like the blue light thing that that comes out of the screens, and that has been associated with difficulties in sleeping, and it has also been linked with attention sort of issues in childhood as well. So I think to just blanket statement that watching screens okay as long as you're watching educational content, or is not a very responsible thing for the BBC to be doing, because it's not as clear as that, it's not as clear cut as that. And I do agree with them in terms of the aspect of non-judgment. I don't think we should be judging any other any parent or educator about their choices for their children. But I think there does need to be balanced information based on sort of scientific facts and research when kind of making something as important as that. On the subject of eyesight, something that there is research about is how being outside can be really important for children in terms of preventing short-sightedness, or at least delaying the onset of short-sightedness. There's clear research that being outside, and particularly in natural spaces, helps with that, and I believe that's to do with, again, having to do multi-vision in the outdoors. There's things at distances, there's things closer, so your eyes are constantly having to move and adjust where they're focusing, and so it's really healthy for eyesight, as well as obviously the rest of us, to be out here. And apparently if your child has already developed short-sightedness, unfortunately it won't help once that's actually started, but in earlier childhood it will stop that from happening, at least until later. And apparently short-sightedness in childhood is on the increase, and again some scientists are linking that possibly with increased indoor sedentary screen-based lifestyles, and again since the pandemic in particular, because obviously everyone was kind of stuck in their houses and so they weren't getting outside. So there is a knock-on effect to screen time that I think parents and educators need to be aware of and make an informed judgment. Another aspect of screen time that I just like to explore is, if you're watching stuff on screens, does that, what does that come at the cost of in terms of your own creativity or your own doing of the stuff? So one of the things that the BBC advert says is about it encourages people to get out more, or to be more active or something, it said, and it kind of uses an animation to show the little boy watching some people dancing and watching some sports. I'm thinking, well, that doesn't necessarily correlate. For example, I've noticed in childhood, and well, not actually just in childhood, adults as well, that sort of voyeurism of watching other people do stuff rather than doing it yourself. There's a lot of this is more adults, but there's a lot of like travel blogs and people talking about that, and of course it's very interesting to see different places, but I wonder whether people then go and do those journeys themselves, and I wonder whether that, if you start watching other people doing stuff in childhood, whether that sets you up as an adult to be just an observer in your own life rather than a active participating human being out in the world doing things. So in summary, Yes, I agree that we shouldn't be judging people in terms of the choices they make for their parenting or for their educating. We do live in a tricky world where difficult decisions have to be made every day. And I do agree that, you know, some content is more valuable than others. And a good example of this, if you've never come across the documentary The Social Dilemma, which talks about social media, and it's been made by the people who kind of created lots of the social media platforms, then I recommend watching that. And again, there's research that's linking social media usage to increases in narcissism and also increase in like self-harm in our teenagers as well. So, you know, there's some clear research out there that shows that that sort of screen time can have a very negative effect on our children and teenagers' mental health. Yes, there are those elements that I do agree with. However, I do think it's not as clear cut as that there are some, you know, there is some research out there, particularly for very young children as well, about the possible risks associated with unregulated screen time. And I guess I would wish that our authorities and big organisations perhaps are more honest about that and present a more balanced argument so that people can make their own informed choices about it. Anyway, I'll get off my soapbox now. What do you think? Let me know in the comment section below. Yeah, it's one of those tricky things to navigate as a parent in the modern world. Screen time, yeah, what do you think about it? If you've enjoyed this video, do give us a thumbs up and consider subscribing to our channel if you haven't already, so you can join us in the woods again next time. The irony being on a screen. Thanks for watching.
Bye bye.
Does screen time give you square eyes? Do big organisations spread propaganda and lies? Balanced research is the key. And we can improve our eyesight when we head to the trees. Thanks. Bye. Bye.